Happy Tuesday. I'm so excited that I'm coming to you virtually from my home office. Today, I want to chat about two different things. Number one being mortgage interest rates, and number two being our buy versus rent comparison tool. So let's jump into our mortgage interest rates. What the heck is happening to rates today? Well, if you've probably heard, inflation is actually coming in higher than anticipated. And so, therefore, the thought of the Federal Reserve cutting interest rates is actually pulled back, where initially we thought that we were going to see 4 to 6 different rate cuts throughout the year. I think people are coming to the conversation that we might only see 1 to 3. And because inflation came in last week higher than expected, it means that we probably are not going to see Fed fund rates cut in the near future, being May or June, possibly even July. So we tiptoed into the 7.5% interest rates. Yes, you heard me right. 7.5%, which is our second highest over the year, where we saw 8% in October. But check this out, we're actually seeing higher mortgage applications for purchases. So, what exactly does that mean? I think that means that buyers are kind of settling into the fact that the interest rate is what it is, and their want to buy a home or their need to buy a home is actually more important to them than their need to get a much lower interest rate. Now, I know you might be saying, yeah, Shelley, but affordability might be the factor. Obviously, that is weighing in a lot of people. And so we're looking at different ways that we can help, whether it's through co-signing for mortgages, whether it's just looking at getting them approved for condos or townhomes and having the capacity or capability to do that. And then also looking also at the down payment assistance programs that are out there. So if you have any questions about where rates are at, make sure you stay tuned or ask your favorite Prosperity Lending loan officer. Tomorrow, Chairman Powell is going to be speaking to talk a little bit about what's happening behind the closed doors today and tomorrow. So pay close attention to that. And the second thing I want to share with you is our buy versus rent tool. This is a co-branded flyer that can be provided to you to help a buyer better understand what it looks like for them to buy or rent. So here I've got a scenario based on a $450,000 purchase price here in Las Vegas. This is based on a 3.5% down payment FHA mortgage. And so for a buyer who's paying $2,500 in rent today. So take a look at this. Looking at this data, it would indicate to me that if this buyer is only going to stay in their home for the next 2 years, it might not make sense for them to purchase a home in today's rate environment because they might actually be losing money. But if you look at it based on a 3-year turn or time frame, that's when they actually would see that they get a return on investment. So you see here within that first 3 years, they would actually be making money. And you might be saying, well, Shelley, how is that factored in? Well, it's factored into 3 different ways. So they look at obviously the cash flow difference. So starting off at $2,500, the mortgage payment is going to be closer to like $3,200. So there's going to be a difference in deficit. However, if they're renting, there's typically an increase in rent. And so they factored in a 3% increase in rent year over year. They're also looking at one of the major benefits of purchasing a home is appreciation. And so this appreciation is based on 4%, which is forecasted here in Clark County. And so 4% year over year, you're looking at their third year that they would earn $5,000. This also includes principal reduction, right? When you pay rent, you pay the landlord's mortgage and interest. When you pay your own mortgage and you buy a home, that pays your own principal reduction and amortization down. So this form can actually be scaled up from 3 to 5 to 7. I think the new average for people staying in their home is about 7 years. And check that out. 98,487 is what this potential buyer would look to gain based off of them buying a home versus renting. And it has all of the different factors layered in here to the form. This is something we can easily create for you. We can also co-brand it for you. So for any information or more information on this buy versus rent comparison tool, or you want to talk a little bit about where interest rates are at or where they're headed, feel free to reach out to your favorite Prosperity Lending loan officer and make it a productive week.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Signature Virtual Sales Meeting. I'm Violet Beauregard from Willy Wonka, and I'm here to help you today. I'm just kidding. I'm Chris Bishop, and I'm super excited to be joining you guys this morning talking about buyer-broker agreements. So a little bit of history. Been in the real estate industry almost at 20 years, I think, next month. And unfortunately, for the first 5 years of my business, I didn't work by agreement. I trusted every client I got. I was so excited to have them that I just didn't worry about it. And unfortunately, it was a close personal friend and someone I grew up with that taught me the lesson to always use a buyer broker agreement. I'd done everything I could for this buyer. I'd shown them every home in Southern Nevada, at least it felt like it. We'd probably gone through 50 properties, finally found the perfect house for them, put it under contract, and it was a new build. So we had to wait about 6 months for it to be completed. Around month 5, I got a phone call from the builder that said, hey, the home's almost ready. We got to get the loan process going. And so, of course, I got the ball rolling and I called my buyer and I said, hey, great news. Home's complete. We're finally at that point. We're ready to go. And that's when they let me know that they had gone to an open house and bought a home and moved into that home. And now they wondered if I could get their earnest money back on that new home build, which I did. But that lesson taught me that I will never again represent a client without making sure that my interests as well as theirs are protected. And so what I've done is I'm going to go through with you my routine on what I do to represent a buyer. And you can feel free at any point. We have the chat going. Beta and I are stuck here in this little room. And so Beta is going to help me answer any questions you guys have, but we'll try to get to all of them as we can in the chat. And so I really appreciate you taking the time to listen through this, and hopefully you all will be signing an agreement with me to purchase a home. So I developed about 18 simple questions that I go through with every client. Now let's talk about kind of the process when this starts out. Unfortunately, during COVID, it was very hard to meet a buyer face-to-face at the office. And thank goodness that that's over and we're now able to do that. So you could do this presentation over the phone if you're left with no other options. Let's say that you're cold calling and you get an out-of-state buyer that's going to be purchasing. Maybe they won't see the home in person until they actually get here for the inspection. But you could go through this process directly over the phone, asking these questions. Best case scenario is that if you have the availability, I would recommend that you start a chat with them and get them used to using the Signature app by putting them on the client side. It allows you the opportunity to do a virtual meeting with them and have a little bit of face-to-face just like we're doing now. But it gives you the opportunity to ask these questions and notate some of the answers so that they can refer back to them as well. My favorite scenario is to bring them into the office. Show them that you have a place of business, show them the beautiful location that you work from, and it really solidifies in their mind that you're a real person who has a real job and you make income from this to pay for the office that you're sitting in. And so these series of questions kind of go through the process of how you present documents and how you kind of share with them the information that you want them to know. But more importantly, it's about getting info about them so that you can use that in the search for their home. So my first question on here that I use with every client, tell me why you've decided to enter the market at this time right now to buy a home. That question for me is really important because it tells me what has transpired that brought this buyer to my door. What has happened to them maybe in a previous transaction, a previous market, or in a previous home purchase that's caused them now is the time to actually go out and buy a house. I call this kind of the mystery gift question because it's amazing to me what buyers are actually thinking that they've heard from their friends or family or maybe not as credible of a source of what's really going on in the marketplace. I'm sure you all have had that one client that came in and said, hey, my uncle says that we should offer 25% less than list on anything that we buy, and now I think is a really good time to buy a home. Unfortunately, I don't want to wait until I've already been showing them homes to find out that they don't really understand the market or really have any motivation to enter the market before I start asking these questions. And so now is a pretty good time to ask that. My second question has to do with their real estate experience, and that is, do you currently own any other properties? It's funny to me as a broker in some scenarios, I've actually worked with agents who have found out later that their client owns several real estate investment assets and they could have sold those properties in order to purchase the home you're helping them find. But not only do I care about their current home, but I want to know about all their real estate assets. And sometimes you actually have to go down the road of asking, well, do you own any commercial buildings? Do you own any residential land? Do you own any commercial land? Do you have any timeshares? Do you have any properties at all that you've signed a deed or taken a loan on that could help us in acquiring your home? But more importantly, I make sure and take notes and ask them for those properties so that I can help them as their real estate practitioner for life after this transaction's over. So make sure that you're actually inquiring about it. A couple of years back, I had a real estate agent that worked with me. She was representing a buyer and she went to the home inspection. And while she was there, she thought it'd be really nice to leave a thank you card for the seller. just a way to say, hey, thanks for letting us into your home. Thanks for taking 3 hours out of your day. And she just left it on the counter at the house. And of course, the seller wasn't there. Seller got home, read the card, thought it was a fantastic gesture, and actually called that agent up and said, hey, we think you're fantastic and we really appreciate you. Would you be interested in listing our home for sale that we have down the street? We'd probably like to sell it too. And to her question was, well, why didn't you talk to your current agent about it? And the answer was, nobody asked. And so again, that's number 2 on my list of why I always ask that question. Do you currently own any other properties? Number 3, do you need to sell anything? Properties, stocks, bonds, anything else do you need to liquidate for the purchase of this home? A lot of times in the real estate transaction, buyers aren't as familiar with the process, and they may not know that if they're going to use their investment account or funds from their 401k, some of those items could take up to 30 days to clear or season. If you're working with foreign investors that come from another country, there are rules and regulations that could cause their wire to be stopped by the Federal Reserve until it hits a clearing period. So I always make sure and ask the question in the very beginning, let's make sure your funds are ready for the activity so there's nothing to deter you when you find the perfect home. Number 4, this question's kind of funny, and you know I'm a funny guy, but does anyone owe you any money that we could use for the purchase of this house? If you've ever worked with a first-time home buyer that may be very low on funds trying to acquire that home, it is really nice to know if someone out there would be willing to help them. And so maybe that's a parent, a grandparent, a friend, a family member, someone that may actually owe them money that they lent it to, and now is the perfect time for them to ask for those funds so that we can put them in the best position possible when it comes time to actually negotiate on the purchase. If you guys remember, about 4 years ago, we had a scenario where there was multiple offers on every single property. And for a first-time home buyer, it's important that they would have those extra funds to be able to fight for the appraisal or to be able to pay above market price if the appraisal didn't appraise on that property. Number 5, this isn't a multiple personality question, but the question is, will you be the only buyer? Can you imagine going through the hours of prep time, sitting down and having a meeting one-on-one with somebody after scheduling it to find out that there is another buyer who hasn't been part of the process at all? For me, in my business, I've had this happen several times where the person who got referred to me, I just took at face value that they were the one that was going to be making the decisions, and unfortunately they weren't. So I want to know at this point, before I go any further, spend any more of our time, will there be any other one who's part of the process? And so that leads also to question number 6, who else will take part of the process of seeing properties with you? About 10 years ago, I was representing a friend that I went to high school with, and I had a personal connection with them, and we've known each other pretty much all of our lives. And as we were going through the home buying process, they said, hey, our mom would like to come over and check out the properties that we're looking at and, kind of help us make the decision on what we're going to do. Unfortunately, I found that out after I'd already been showing them homes for several weeks. And of course, we at that point did find the perfect home. And the mother came over and basically hated everything about it. She didn't like where we were looking. She didn't like the properties we were looking at. She didn't like the price point they were looking in. And so I added this question so that I could have every single person helping make the decision and those actually doing the purchase at the table so we don't run into any problems later. This next question is kind of interesting because a lot of times when you're working with a buyer, the down payment is something they've been saving for years. And a lot of people don't save as part of their financial structure. And so I asked the question, do you have a 401k or possibly a retirement savings that you've been using or working with, from your job that we could use towards the home purchase? Many consumers don't know that there is an allowability under many 401ks where you can use those funds to invest into your primary home and get a one-time exemption. Of course, this is all up to their financial planner and the 401k they use. But again, it's just another tool to help them to be ready and able and willing to buy when the time comes. The next question, does your employer know you're buying a home and do they offer any special incentives for you to purchase that home? Believe it or not, this question came because of my cousin. My cousin worked for a Fortune 500 company here in Las Vegas. And what I found out is as we were going through the home purchase, her HR department actually offered a 1% incentive that she could use towards anything in the home buying or selling process. And so because we found that out and because I've been able to use it with other clients, I was able to help my clients save money, which enforces the value of why you hired me as your realtor. So I always put the question out there. Sometimes they'll say, hey, I don't know. I don't think my company offers anything. Hey, listen, before we go out and view any homes, why don't you take the time to call your HR department or your boss or your employer and just find out if they're willing to contribute towards that home purchase. I know that when my in-laws bought their house a number of years ago, my father-in-law's company actually said, yeah, we'd love to participate in helping you do that. We actually offer a program where we'll loan you the down payment for your home and you can pay it back over time from your paychecks. Again, just another way to help them save money and provide even more value for you. Next question. And I kind of phrase it this way because we're getting into the fact of how they're going to finance the property. And so I always ask the question this way: do you want to pay cash or did you want to get a loan for the home? Now, they could be a first-time home buyer, and I know that, and there's no way they have cash, but I always kind of felt that this question put them in a good place mentally, made them feel really good that I'm there for them. And there's no chance that I know of where they may or may not be able to just have that cash laying around. And if I ask it that way, it probably makes them feel a little bit better about that and the process we're going to go through. If they do say that they have cash, then my next question, of course, is, do you have a proof of funds that you could provide that we can provide the listing agent to show them where you're going to pull the money from? About 10 years ago as well, we were working through the REO crisis, and I had a client come in, elderly lady that had come in and shared with me that she's there to buy her first home. And I said, fantastic. Did you want to pay cash or get a loan? And she says, I'd like to pay cash. And I said, that's great. Can you share with me a proof of funds? She said, sure, let's go out to my car. And so I walked out into the parking lot of my office with her, and we went to the trunk of her car, and I didn't know what was going to be in that trunk. And she popped open, and in the back of the car was a box full of money. And I said, ma'am, that's fantastic. Best proof of funds I've ever gotten. Unfortunately, I can't take cash. Would you mind taking that to the bank and getting a cashier's check for it? Which she did, and it was fantastic. It turned out that her and her husband had been saving for over 20 years, and they'd put a little bit away every single month out of the money that they earned. And unfortunately, he had just passed away the year before, and her entire goal was that she buy a home for the security of that property, and she used those funds to do so. So you never know where that proof of funds is going to come from. If they say, no, we definitely need a lender, you want to make sure we have an amazing lending partner with Prosperity and Shelly P and her team. And I always recommend them as my number one lender to the group, but I always recommend three. I recommend three lenders that they get to choose from. And I'm just happy to say most of the time they always pick Shelly, and she does an amazing job. Of course, when they pick Shelly, Shelly provides me with a pre-qualification letter where she's done the underwriting process up to a certain point to make sure that they have income, that they have credit. And then I use that letter to then go out and, of course, when we offer on the home, show that they're viable in their financing options. Now, there's a big difference between a pre-qual and a pre-approval. A pre-qual is kind of like toilet paper. It doesn't really do much, when they initially go through the process. It's just kind of a phone conversation. But a pre-approval means that they've really scrubbed and looked over those credit items and their job income statements and everything else. And sometimes you want to put your client in that position and know that there's been another set of eyes from the underwriter who's actually looked at this and said, yeah, everything looks great. We can go to the next steps, and all we need is a property address. So definitely reach out to Prosperity about finding out the difference between those two items and the things that they do to put your buyer in the best position possible. At this time with the lender, when they go through that, usually if any grant programs are available or things like that, it's one of the main reasons why Shelly shares those with you at our sales meetings, so that you always have those available so that you're able to share those with your buyer, again, selling the value of your knowledge and your experience and how you're going to help save them money. Next question after that is we start to get into the process of understanding what have they already done. When I was a brand new real estate agent out conducting open houses, I was a little bit naive to think that my buyer had only come to my open house and they hadn't been to anyone else's. And what I come to find out is when they leave my open house, if I haven't converted them at that point, where do you really think they go after? Do you think they go home and think about you and talk about you and say, what a great time it was meeting Chris? Probably not. Probably they're off to another new home site or they're off to another open house. And so it's really important for me at this step to really find out, what have you done? Have you viewed any other homes? Have you been to any of those new home sites in the community? Have you registered with any of those new home sites? And usually when you're having that conversation with the buyer, they're going to start dropping hints. Like I looked at those great Toll Brothers models. I looked at these great Richmond American models. At least at this point, before I've signed an agreement or I've committed any of my time and energy, I know that I may be dealing with a client who wants to buy a new home product that I won't be able to get paid on. And it's important at that point for me to kind of mitigate that loss or the risk to my business, but at least we can have the conversation about it at that point. I then asked the question specifically, have you been to any other open houses? And this question is one of procuring cause. Because if they were at that open house and they toured it with that agent who was at the open house, and they went through the process of maybe writing an offer on it that didn't get accepted, or that agent is waiting for them to call them back and they just happen upon me, I want to know if I would be dealing with a procuring cause case so that I could then negotiate it with that agent, or I could let them know that, they may have to return to that person if the scenario doesn't make sense. Next on my list is a very pointed question I ask, and I say, listen, I know that everybody knows another realtor. Are you currently working with any others? I'm sure you guys have heard the joke. Cop pulls over a driver. Cop walks up to the door, says to the driver, hey, give me your real estate license. And the driver says, well, don't you mean my ID? And he says, no, not everyone has one of those. Well, unfortunately, we were in a marketplace where everyone did have a real estate license. And so I asked the question because wouldn't it be interesting to find out that they have a family member or a friend that's been advising them? I want to know about it now so I can address the issue up front versus talking about it later when we get down to it. I've already shown them homes and written offers for them. Next on the list, I think this is question number 15 or 14, is have you signed any agreements with any other agents? Many times the consumer isn't as familiar with our business or our contracts and the things that we present. And pretty much without this lawsuit that's happened, many agents aren't familiar with buyer broker agreements and the things that are out there. And so I ask this because if they stop and pause, it probably tells me that I might be dealing with another agreement that's out there that I need to address now. And there are ways to do that where I could call that other agent and say, I've been contacted by this client and can we work out a referral fee? Or I need to refer the client back to that broker so that they can work with them on getting out of that agreement, which I can't advise them on how to do. I can't step in the middle of the relationship between that agent and the other party, but I can definitely advise the client on who to contact so that they can ask their questions to. Then the next question, this is it. This is where the rubber meets the road. If we agree to work together today, can you agree not to see any properties, new homes, resell, open houses, vacant land, doesn't matter. Can you agree not to see anything from this point on unless you're seeing it with me? And this is usually a question of trust and commitment. Do you think I'm the person based on these last 15 questions that I have an understanding of the business? And can you make a commitment level to me to agree that we will work together for the point of time we agree upon? Now, when we get to the buyer broker agreement in just a few minutes, one of the main clauses in the front page of the buyer broker agreement is commitment. It's commitment that they're going to work with you and you're going to work with them. And so I like to get this question out of the way to kind of see where they feel. I definitely have sat at the table with a buyer where they said, hey, listen, I'm working with multiple agents and I really don't want to sever those relationships. And I either am going to respond and say, well, listen, I'm not able to commit my time, energy, and money to be able to help you unless I know that you're going to reciprocate. I want to have this conversation in the very beginning instead of being upset about it when we go to write offers and other things are going on. Now, some cases when you're working with an investor who's buying multiple properties, it has been an occurrence where that investor tells me, hey, Chris, I've got another agent that's sending me properties, but anything you send me, I will only purchase with you. And then I can augment the agreement to make sense based on those terms versus just signing it or not signing it without that being done. Okay, next question up here is basically time. When as soon as you sign a buyer to a buyer broker agreement, the first thing they want to do is go out and see property. And the first thing that they want to do is know that your life is committed and focused on helping them find property. So I asked the question at this point to kind of set a timeline and the standard of which they know I'm going to do business. And so I asked the question, what days and times would be best for you based on your work schedule or the schedule of your spouse for us to go out and see property together that I can schedule into my calendar now so that I have those appointments blocked out for you. Many times I'll have a buyer say, well, I can look at property any day in the afternoon. Hey, listen, I can completely appreciate that, but I book my appointments about a week out. And so I'd like to go ahead and schedule those now so that there's no interruption of that. Could we pick these 2 days, and I'll set up appointments for those 2 days? If you don't set that standard, that buyer is going to take advantage of your schedule based on whatever they want versus you being the real estate professional that dictates when you work and how the process unfolds. Next question is a simple one. Do you have any other questions before we go on to my actual agreement? At this point, we kind of pause and reconvene and make sure that all of the things answered before make sense, that we've had enough time and energy to go over their thoughts and concerns. And sometimes it's a lot of simple questions like, can you explain to me the process? Can you explain to me what will happen from this point on? Can you tell me what you charge? Yeah, we'll get to that in just a second when I present my agreement, but do you have any other questions before that? The whole thing is, a lot of times this is the point for me to find their main objection so that I can overcome it before we go any further in any part of the process. Now that that's happened, I'm going to go into the fact of showing them my agreement. And as you know, in state law, it states that we will start with the duties owed. Now, the thing I love about the duties owed is it's not a contract. It actually says at the top of the form, this is not a contract. And so, but I want to read with you a few things in the duties owed to remind you as realtors, the things and licensees in the state, the things that you must do and help a client with in order to get the process done. And so let's start with the first big paragraph, licensees' duties owed to all parties. And I'm just going to read a couple of these, but you know, as you have time today or tomorrow, please go back and read the entire document. It's really important as a licensee, not just when you're taking CE, to understand the documents you present and what they say and how they read. Number one, a Nevada real estate licensee shall, with all parties, not deal with any party to a real estate transaction in a manner which is deceitful, fraudulent, or dishonest. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I need to let you know right now that I can never, in the course of this transaction, with anyone in the transaction, do anything that would be deceitful, fraudulent, or dishonest. I'm sure you can understand that that's the caliber of agent that you would expect. Am I correct? Number two, exercise reasonable skill and care with respect to all parties in the real estate transaction. That means I need to be smart enough to understand how my business works and how I support the people in my business. And so that's why it's important that you're educating yourself in the process like we're going through today, that you're taking your CEs, not just when your license renews, but all along the year to stay updated on laws and regulations and things that are happening in the industry so that you have that knowledge to carry you through the deal. And then, of course, the last one in the end I like as well, abide by all duties, responsibilities, and obligations required of the licensee under the law or regulation. At this point, I go into the fact that I'm also held to the code of ethics by the Realtor Association. And one of those ethics, as Keith Lynham talks about in many of his buyer presentations, is Article 9. Article 9 says that all agreements must be in writing. And so if I'm making a verbal agreement to go out and help a client or represent them, I actually have a responsibility as a realtor to put that agreement in writing, hence the agreement I'm about to show you. He even created a document, which he will share with all of you. Just reach out and ask him for it in the app, and we'll make it available to the company, where he took Article 9, he put it on a piece of paper and has his client sign it. And I think it's a great testament to the fact of a great realtor is showing them the regulations and laws they have to abide by, because when the client asks you to do something you shouldn't be doing, you can simply respond by, remember that document you signed? I can't do anything that's going to break the law or cause a problem with that. It's a great way to handle that objection or any issues that come up from it. Now, let's talk about the duties I owe my client. Of course, I'm always honest, trustworthy, and respectful with them. But let's go to number 3 on that list. I will seek a sale, purchase option, rental or lease of real property in a price and terms stated in the agreement and price acceptable to my client. What I explained to them that this means that I'm going to work in your best interest to get you the deal you want when you want it. And so I'm not working for my interest, I'm working for yours. It's not my money I'm spending, it's your money we're spending. And so my job is to provide you a roadmap and to provide you advice so that you make all the decisions in the process we're going through. Last on that list, and this is one that I like to tie in after I provided the agreement, is I'm going to account to the client for all money and property in which I would have interest or that they receive as part of the sale. And so it's important that as you go through the process, as you help them understand the goals you're going through, that you would provide them a net sheet. Now here with Ticor Title, Ticor has a fantastic app where you can actually download it to your phone and you can do net sheets at the click of a button. You can also go through the process of downloading a mortgage calculator. So if your client comes in and says, you know what, I want to buy a $600,000 house, I think I'll put $100,000 down. We know the interest rate that Shelly's quoted lately, and we put that into the calculator, and it can quickly spit out a payment to say, well, your payment's going to be around $3,400. Do you feel comfortable with that payment before we go any further? Should we be looking at a different amount, or more money down, or less money down? It's just another way to have that at your fingertips where you can do it right here during the buyer presentation to have it. The very bottom of the document, it asks a question. May I or may I not represent both parties? Now, I bring this up because, of course, it has always been my goal that on every home I list that I find a buyer to purchase that property. And I think that would be your goal as well. And so it asks the question of trust. Do you trust that I'm smart enough, that I'm capable, that I'm educated enough in the process, that I'm dedicated enough to you and the other party where I could adequately represent both sides without exchanging information that shouldn't be shared with one party or the other? When they ask that question, I ask their comfort level. How do you feel about that? Do you have any questions on how that would work and that I can explain the process? And most of the time the client will say, well, no, I don't care. Which one would you suggest? And I always say, well, I suggest the one you're most comfortable with, but I would hate to eliminate all of my great price listings from your home search because I've already got a commitment with the seller. If you're okay with it, I'd love to include any listings that I take. Would you be okay with checking May on that box? And then I have them initial it, and I, of course, have them sign, date, and time the document when we present it. And it's extremely important, based on some of the things we've seen before the Real Estate Commission, that the duties owed has a little bit of a distance between itself and the contract you're going to be signing. One of the commissioners asked the question that, how is it possible that you explain the duties owed and the 4 documents with the buyer-broker agreement in the course of 1 minute? And of course, the real estate agent that was asked the question was speechless by saying, well, I guess, how could I? But it was sent this way, or I just had him do it all at once. The whole point was, how do you show that you actually explain these documents before you presented them? Of course, now we move on to the buyer-broker agreement, the agreement we've all been waiting for. The buyer-broker agreement that's provided by Las Vegas Realtors is one that was created by a group of brokers and attorneys that got in the room and kind of decided a series of events that made sense for this document. Now, I've seen different versions of this. I've seen client representation agreements. I've seen shorter agreements created by different brokerages. For right now, I would suggest you use the document that's provided to you. And if you have any changes or suggested changes as this evolves, definitely let us know. And it's not that hard to go to the Forms Committee at LVR and recommend something for their review. But I just want to go over a few items of this document. First off, there's nothing on this document that says it has to be for a year, or it has to be for life, or it has to be forever. Many times I've had a buyer come in from out of town. They're only going to be here for the weekend. And in that weekend, they have to pick a property. So there's nothing wrong with me making this document for 5 days to allow them the time to come in and view homes with me and feel comfortable that if this week doesn't go well, or we weren't able to hit the requirements of what they have, they're not locked into a long-term contract. My only commitment is that I don't work without the agreement. So I need to find some type of form of timeline that works for both of us. I think many times for the average buyer, we would probably agree that 2 to 3 months would make a lot of sense. 2 to 3 months would allow us the time to go out and tour property several times. If we're in a hot market dealing with multiple offers and making multiple offers, and then allowing that process to go into contract. I want to go down to the question on number 1 on the agreement, which says, what type of property do you plan on acquiring? Again, remember the question I asked about 4 and 5 in the list was, what do you own? What real estate goals do you have? I had a client one time let me know that they're looking for a home and a commercial building. I do commercial real estate. And so I check marked both of these items on the document, and it reinforced the fact that I'm their real estate agent helping them with both. Now, if you don't specialize in commercial, or you don't specialize in land or some of the other products, you then would want to refer it over to someone who does, so that you can explain to them, I have a professional that can help you. I have someone who can help you through that process. Then it goes on to what we're all agreeing to. Again, I don't really mind having the conversation with the client on what their requirements are and what my requirements are. And so let's just go over a few of those now while we have the time. Buyer agrees to work exclusively That means just with me, with the broker, not with any other brokers. That means you ain't going to be cheating on me, right? And it says it right in the front page of the document. B, buyer agrees to furnish broker with all relevant data, records, documents, and other information, including a loan pre-approval letter, including the proof of funds at the purchase upon request by broker, and authorizes broker to provide those copies to seller, landlord, and whoever else it's going to be going to. Buyer also agrees to be available, and I love how it says examine properties, we show properties, and respond in a timely manner to communications from the broker. It says that you're going to go out and look at houses with me and respond to me when I send you emails and texts. Buyer agrees to act in good faith to acquire the property and not just string you along, right? It also says that buyer is not going to go out to new home communities without me, because it knows that if they do, we may not get paid. And buyer agrees to the fullest extent allowable under Nevada law that the broker shall be deemed to be procuring cause for any and all successful real estate transactions that come during the term of this agreement. So basically, if the buyer were to read that front page clause, it answers every single question that we just asked in the 18 questions leading up to it. And it proves the point to the buyer, these are commitments. And these are the commitments that we need in order to make the sale happen. Section 3 are the 3 things that the broker agrees to do. A broker holds a current Nevada real estate license, which I do. Broker agrees to work diligently to locate the property acceptable to the buyer. Now, this one I want to stop on for just a second, because this is a call to action. If you were working with 3 or 4 other individuals that you did not have a buyer-broker agreement signed with, are you really working diligently for the one who did? This question was posed to me a number of years ago, that if I work by agreement, I commit my time to those who are committed to me. And I think it's a great way to explain to a buyer, I only have so many hours in a day. I only have so many clients I can work with at one time. This is my obligation. And so that's why I'm presenting this document to you, so that you know the commitment level I have. And then again, at the end, a broker agrees to negotiate as buyer's agent terms that are acceptable to them. Not terms acceptable to me or just what I think should happen. It's all about them and their decision. And then, of course, as the document goes on, right below that on that page is the commission amount. Now, this poses an interesting question to you. There's a decision you need to make in your business and how you want your business to look. What do you put in that box? I'm not going to tell you an amount because it's up to you, but I am going to tell you that based on the terms of this lawsuit, if completely approved, whatever amount you put there is all you should receive. You will not be able to go and get more. You can only go and get what's printed in this document. The other terms of the lawsuit actually stipulate that before you show property of any kind, before you tour someone around on any property at all, you must have this agreement signed, which means this should empower you to be able to actually tell the buyer, listen, I know what's happening in my industry, and as you know, in the duties owed, I have to have an understanding of it, and I'm no longer allowed to be able to go out and do these things without presenting you with this agreement. Do you feel comfortable now at this point signing the document based on what we have? Now, of course, I have sat with buyers who have asked to negotiate, and everything in real estate is negotiable. But the question is, how negotiable is your commitment level? If you say I work for X, and that's your cost of doing business, you should have the conviction to be able to stand behind it and only commit to the buyers that are committed to you. Now, the downside of that means that you're going to have to be out there prospecting to get enough buyers in the pool so that the one buyer, the one time that doesn't sign the agreement, won't completely destroy your business. I'm going to share with you an example of that. About 3 years ago, I had a young lady that was referred to me by her mother, who was a past client of mine. I actually had a phone conference with her where I went through the entire questionnaire that we just did. I then presented her with my buyer-broker agreement electronically. I sent it to her, we reviewed it together, and I said, please let me know if you have any questions. She said, nope, I'm good, the agreement sounds good, send it over and I'll sign it. So I did. I sent it over electronically for her to sign, and I waited for it to come back. And unfortunately, it didn't come back. So I called her the next day and I said, hey, I haven't got the agreement back yet. Did you have any other questions I could help you with? And she says, yeah, you know what? I've decided not to sign it. And I said, okay, great. Why have you decided not to sign it? She says, well, you know, my office mate here that sits in the cubicle next to me said I shouldn't sign any agreements with realtors. And I said, wow, okay, great. Well, why did they tell you that? Oh, well, because they're a realtor. And they just said it's not worth it to sign any agreements. And I said, okay, fantastic. Can I just ask, why didn't you pick them to go out and show you homes? And she says, well, they're here working every day, so they don't have the schedule to be able to help me do it. I said, okay, great. Well, unfortunately, I don't work without the agreement, so I'll wish you the best. And it sounds like you have someone that can help you with your real estate needs. And I went back to prospecting. Ironically, I found a buyer later that day that did make the commitment, who I took out to show property to. To my knowledge, 3 years later, this individual has still never purchased a home. And so the real question is, what did I lose? If she never purchased a home and she had no commitment to the process or what was going to happen, I really didn't lose anything. But I would have lost a lot if I would have sat and focused on the fact that, she wouldn't sign my agreement. Now I don't have a client. I couldn't focus on that. I had to get back out there, start prospecting, and make it happen. Now, after they've signed the agreement, hopefully in person with you, and if you have any questions on the agreement, you want to role play or strategize that, feel free to reach out to me and any one of the management team members. We're always happy to help you do that. And we have a number of agents in the offices that are actually practicing these agreements and presenting them. I know when I first started in the business, I made my parents, my wife, my kids, my friends, my family sit through my presentation of this agreement. And I asked them to be a little hard on me and critique me on how it's going. That helped me prepare for those situations where I present it to people with different personalities or different questions and things I'm not prepared for, so that I could role play and answer those with them. Now, after we've signed that agreement, I think it's really important for the process that the buyer understands how we find property as a real estate agent. I think many times they think we just pick properties out of thin air, or they are finding those properties on Zillow or Redfin or Truly or whatever website they're on. And by me showing them how the process works, it really helps wind down the process to a specific group of homes. And so my next question is in here, now that we have completed the agreement, are you familiar with the current market we're in? And so I asked that question because there are a lot of misconceptions, just like we've seen with the lawsuit, on what's really happening in the real estate market. People get a lot of bad information and a lot of bad advice. And so at this point, I usually will pull up the market report. Well, I'll show them the inventory levels. I'll show them how many homes are available without an offer. I'll show them what the median price has done over a period of time. And I'll show them what the average days on market is for a property to be listed and then to sell. By doing that, I've educated my client, which has provided more value and reinforced why they hired me. And it makes me the authority on the source for information with real estate. The nice thing about this process is this is the beginning of me doing this every single month for the rest of their lives. Well, at least, the rest of my life. After that point, I asked them the question, can you share with me what you must have in a home? Meaning, can you tell me the things you can't live without? Not that you'd like to have, but if you say that, I could live in 2 bedrooms, but I'd like 3, I'm going to show you how our real estate MLS system finds property for us as real estate agents. Based on that information that you've just provided me, I'm going to now walk you through the MLS. And so at this time, if I'm doing this through the app or I'm doing it with them in person, I will actually pull up the MLS. I will put in the condition and information that they have, and I want the client to see me whittle down from 3,000 available properties down to the 12 or 15 that make perfect sense for them. And I want them to go through and look at those properties online and tell me things they like and don't like, so that I can further whittle that number down to 5 or 6 homes. Once I've done that, the buyer has an understanding that these are the perfect homes for me. These are the homes that I want to go see, and based on everything I've seen you show me, these are the homes I'm going to choose from. This is the perfect way to have a buyer buy the first time out, because they've owned and participated in the process. From that point on, it's a trial and error process as you go through it, but at least with this buyer, they're committed to you. And then, of course, the last question for any meeting that you have with any client is, who else do you know that might need the services of a realtor at this time? Do you know anyone that's looking to buy, sell, or invest in real estate? And if you really want the extra point for extra credit, what are your future real estate goals? A lot of times a buyer who's buying their primary home is so focused on getting that done that they have no time to think about what could come in the future. And so by me asking them the question, I start the ball rolling of them thinking about what if? What ifs make me extra money? And so the point of it is that I don't want to be your real estate agent just for this purchase. I want to be your real estate investment counsel for life. I want to provide you with a roadmap to financial freedom by being able to buy any property you want or selling any property you want, or maybe those assets that they told me about, being able to value those and show them better investments that they can turn that capital into. Every single buyer that you meet with should have the opportunity and the availability to buy between 4 and 10 homes with the right planning and the right financial information. I hope you guys found this helpful. I hope it leads you to feeling more, conviction in the process. Again, if there's any time that you want to sit down and role play the buyer presentation, we'd love to help you with that. And I'm going to make sure that the information that I shared today, the questions, are available to you in the chat. Again, just a reminder, I definitely think that you should go out and read the complete buyer broker agreement and the complete duties owed, so you're familiar with the terms that are in there. And we're going to check real quick to see if we have any questions here in the chat or anything I can answer for you. Beta, do we have any questions?
Yes, we do. So it looks like, will SREG have another presentation that deals with the new BBA?
So let me read it up here for everyone. Will Signature have another presentation that deals with the new BBA issues when in the past clients have not had to commit to paying our commission out of pocket? This is what we are now facing. Yes. So great question and point. As everything is evolving, the question of how will the client afford to pay the commission? I think what we're going to see as an industry is that we're going to have some changes in what will be allowable. I haven't seen this happen as much yet. Of course, we have seen listing agents that have put 0 in the co-op section where they've said ask for seller concessions or call listing agent to inquire. I do want to remind everyone that this is similar to how the new home process works right now, where you have to inquire to find out what's going on. Now, the whole point is that I know, and you know, that when you're working with a buyer who may have limited funds, the question then becomes, how will you be paid? There's nothing that stopped you in the past from going and asking the seller to contribute to that as part of the process. Again, it wasn't typical and not something we usually did, but now you're kind of empowered to be able to do it and to go and ask those questions. This is just another form of negotiation that we're going to be going through. Many of us have speculated that there might be a document that's provided where the buyer's agent could then write that document, ask for a certain amount, and then present it along with the offer, similar to what we do with some of the other addendums that were out there. That hasn't been done yet, but I'm going to tell you that I've already had the scenario where my client said, listen, I have no problem with you getting the fee and I have no problem with covering any difference. Can you see about asking the seller to cover this amount? All of those conversations have gone pretty well so far with the listing agent, and they've been pretty open and committed to offering some type of co-op. I think a lot of times right now, they're just so afraid to put anything into the MLS that you might be surprised on what they have. But we definitely have more information on that coming down the road. How long usually is your presentation, and have you overcome all the negative responses of not signing? If so, could you give me an example? Well, hopefully my presentation is about 20 to 30 minutes. It depends on how long they talk and how long I talk, which could be a problem. But I really want you to feel good about the presentation process, because if I were sitting down with anybody next to a roaring fire, enjoying a glass of wine, and we were just having a conversation, that's really what this is. This is a conversation of me inquiring about them and their real estate experience and what they're looking to do. And nobody would feel very comfortable signing a contract with somebody they don't really know. And so it allows me the opportunity to get to know them better and for them to feel secure that I'm the right agent for them. The biggest objection I've ever gotten in this process wasn't the commission, believe it or not. It was the timeline. It was how long the agreement would be for. And then I realized at a certain point that it doesn't have to be forever, and I can sign multiple with a client. They just want to feel good that they do understand they're using my time. And they do understand that they're getting the value of my experience. And so as long as I fixed the time issue, we seemed to work through and I didn't really have any other problems. I'm going to be honest with you. After I committed to this process and I've role played it, in 3 years, I've had that one client not sign my agreement. Very few people seem to think that they're going to spend my time and energy without compensating for it. Now, I definitely have had a few people negotiate with me up or down on the commission rate, but it's not as typical, I think, that you would see. Okay, next question. How would you recommend we handle a buyer who signs multiple buyer brokerage agreements with other agents? Yeah, I actually had a client for an agent of mine who signed 16 buyer broker agreements. They just didn't care. They signed one with anyone that was out there. Unfortunately, that's something that could usually end up in litigation. Technically, if they sign your agreement and you're out working with them, showing them property, they probably owe you a commission. Now, it's the choice that you have whether you're going to proceed after them and with the agreement in support of the brokerage, whether you're going to go and litigate against it. But in this example, my agent hadn't seen the buyer in weeks. And so every time they'd ask him to go out and see property, they were always busy, which leads me to believe that there were signs that they were in agreements with other parties. Now, I will tell you this. I've had a client sign an agreement with one of my agents, completely negate the agreement and go out to a new home community and buy a new home. My agent simply took the agreement, proceeded to the home builder and presented the agreement time-stamped for the time period in which they were looking and presented it to that escrow for her to be paid. And of course, the builder called the client saying, hey, that your agent's presented this buyer broker agreement. What would you like to do? And the buyer paid the agent through the process of closing the home. Builder didn't contribute anything because their rules said they wouldn't, but the client participated. I've also had the same scenario where it ended in a mediation between the agent, the broker, and that client where they settled on an amount of money for the time and energy they expensed. Listen, folks, this is no guarantee forever. And these documents are created so that if we went to court, they could be litigated against, and that's what a contract is for. But usually in that scenario, I mean, once you hit that point, this probably isn't going to be a client you're working with ever again, or if it is, you probably want to protect that relationship for future business. My whole point is that at least I know with some level of good feeling that there is a commitment level from that client in most cases, but guaranteed, you're going to have those one-off situations that happen and there's nothing you can do about it. Any other questions, Beta, that I missed? I have an investor client sign the duties owed, but is reluctant to sign the BPA. I asked them to come into the office. I've emailed them, but each time I send the BPA, they will not sign. Yeah, unfortunately, that will happen. And so I guess my question to you is, what really is their commitment level to buying a house? What really is their commitment level to working with you? And are they going to be the best client for you to spend your time on? Anyone who basically can't get through the process after you've asked all those questions, I definitely agree with you. The best thing is to bring them into the office, sit down and talk face to face, and just actually ask them, how do you expect me to commit my time when you have no commitment to me? How do you expect me to be spending my energies when you have no commitment to purchasing a property? That's why this agreement is here, so that we're committed to each other. And if the answer to the question for them is no, then they're not motivated. They may still end up buying somewhere at some time, but I'm again going to tell you that the better use of your time is to go back to the table and prospect and forget about this buyer for now, because if they do get serious, they'll come back. And if they don't, well, you know, you're going to lose one or two. That's just the process we live in as an industry. Thank you so much. We'll role play how you would explain. Would you role play how you explain your commission is paid to the buyer? Yeah, great, fantastic. So Mr. Buyer, when you purchase the home, part of that price point on the home includes the cost of commission. And so I'm sure you can understand that if I ask the seller for a concession to cover my commission, that's money that you're financing over the next 30 years, if that's what happens in the course of your loan. Maybe you'd feel better paying those funds up front so you're not paying interest on the money, but it's already included. And that's the whole point of the lawsuit, folks. Those funds are already included. That's in there. The buyer ends up paying for it when they purchase the home. The seller ends up giving it in consideration for the payment they get on the home. And so it really hasn't changed if you think about it in theory. It's just the point that the buyer didn't understand, or at least they claim they didn't understand, that some of that money went to the buyer's agent as commission. To be honest with you, I think the whole point is, let's talk about what we didn't talk about. And that's the fact that if they go out and search for 2 months, if I write 13 offers, they never get accepted, I will have worked the entire 2 months for free. I'm the only person in the transaction next to the listing agent that will have spent that much time at the rate of $100 or $200 an hour and will receive absolutely zero for it unless they find the perfect home for them at the price that they want to pay. I think it's also important that when you have a client who questions commission, to remind them that you may end up working for free if they don't get everything they want. That usually solidifies that whole point. I don't see any more questions in the chat, so I hope this, guys, was useful to you. I really appreciate all of you. I know this is going to be new and weird and strange, and you're going to navigate through the process, but all I can tell you is practice makes perfect. So take the time, role play this with your friends and family, role play it with your next client or use them for it. And if any other questions come up, one of the best things you can also do is, just like this, go in and video yourself doing the presentation and watch it and see how you look doing it. It'll help you be a better agent and better presenter. Guys, with that, thank you so much. I hope you have a fantastic week. And as always, you need anything, please let us know.